So welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. I am your host, Dr. Diane. And as a longtime thought I was an Athena girl, I am very excited to welcome Tracy Wolff to our show. She has the most delightful middle grade series debuting this week, The Aftermyth. And you are going to love taking a very different look at the world of the Greek gods and goddesses. Wonder, curiosity, connection. Where will your adventures take you? I'm Dr. Diane, and thank you for joining me on today's episode of Adventures in Learning. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your show, and I'm so excited to be here.
I am so happy to have you. So I read The Aftermyth, and I was completely sucked in. I love Penelope's story. I love the idea of Ellie and Fifi. I loved the way you sort of took Percy Jackson and Harry Potter and School for Good and Evil, like all the elements that good middle grade fantasy have, but you created your own world and you've got very clear rules to your world and very clear personalities. Can you describe what went into creating The Aftermyth?
Do you want me to give a quick blurb about what the Aftermyth is?
Let's start with an overview for people and then let's dive in because I love this book and I want everybody to run out and grab it right now.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really kind of you. The Aftermyth is about a young girl named Penelope Weaver who has spent her entire life knowing that when she went off to Anaximander's academy, when she and her twin brother were 13, that they would both be Athenas. Their parents are Athenas, their grandparents are Athenas. They come from a long line of Athenas. And so she was certainly certain that when she got there, the hall that she was going to be placed in would be Athena Hall, because the halls there are all named after, there's 5 halls and each one is named after a different Greek god. Unfortunately, from the second she pretty much steps foot on her journey to Anaximander's, absolutely everything that can go wrong goes wrong for this girl who always has a plan and is always 10 minutes early to everything and is always, knows exactly how things are going to go. Everything goes not the way she expects it. And she ends up actually, after a very long, disastrous beginning, being placed into the hall she likes the least, which is, well, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. Well, I guess
Go for it.
Aphrodite Hall. And Aphrodite Hall is filled up with people who are very, very different than the Athena students. And her roommate and the people she gets to know are very different. But as she goes along this journey, a couple things happen. One, Penelope realizes that maybe she wasn't an Athena girl after all. But she also realizes that, everything she's been taught in these myths that have been handed down through her whole life, maybe there's another side to them. Maybe there's something going on there that nobody really wants her or anybody else to know about. And that's kind of the root of what the Aftermyth is.
And I loved that. And as a grown-up reader, I definitely got that. I found myself thinking that, we're in a culture right now in a society where we're questioning everything. We're questioning what we learned in school. We're questioning the history we were taught. And Penelope kind of dives in and shows us the cost of believing everything at face value, as well as what happens when you start questioning the reality that everybody else lives in. Was that part of your intent, or is that a happy accident of when the book has come out?
Oh, I mean, I think, yeah, I think that when the book is coming out is incredibly, apropos. But no, it definitely wasn't a happy accident. I think that in general, this is something that we've been living with as a society, not just, this month, but certainly for quite some time. And it was definitely one of the questions that I had when I kind of went into this book, is the idea of history is always written by the winners, right? And particularly in ancient times, those winners tended to be men and very patriarchal. And I wanted to look at it like, one, what is this myth and what are these myths that I'm going to continue through the series? How much of what we know about them is based on what our patriarchal and also just, certain the way that the world is and has been for the last, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, whatever. And how much of what we know about these have been passed on through that? And what would happen if we looked at her story instead? The example I always give when I talk about this is I wanted to start with Pandora's Box. And this is actually the second Pandora's Box book I've written. The first one was a YA, gosh, like 14 years ago now, and it was a Techno Armageddon. She opened an attachment instead of a box and hearkened Technological Armageddon. But what I really wanted to do here, even more than I did in that book so many years ago, is I wanted to look at the fact that, like, Pandora's box, the whole story, if you think about it, she was created by a male god with the help of another male god to punish two male titans for something that they did. Zeus went to Hephaestus and said, "Hey, I want to make this really beautiful woman and I want her to have, all these different characteristics." So he made sure all the gods gave her a gift. But it's because I'm really, really mad at Prometheus. And then I'm going to give her to him as a wife. I mean, first of all, right there, women as chattel. But
Right.
I'm going to give him as a wife. And then she's going to do this terrible thing and she's going to ruin his life and everything forever, right? And also, I'm really mad that he stole fire to give to the human. So she's also going to ruin, humanity and all of that. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that,
Yes.
you know, but also this idea that, that, that like Pandora should be blamed for something that two male titans theoretically did and was created by two male gods for the express purpose of doing what she did. But now she's the one who's at fault? That makes no sense to me. And I wanted to kind of look at that.
Well, and I loved the way that you unpacked it, and it unfolds really beautifully within the story. I'm
Oh,
not going
thank
to offer
you.
spoilers, but I love it when a book challenges me to rethink something. And so, you and I were talking just before we hopped on about which god or which goddess. And I said at the top of the show, I always thought, as I went through the Percy Jacksons, but even growing up as a little girl, I totally connected to Penelope because I always thought, oh, I'm an Athena, it's all about the brain, it's about the books. As I've gotten older, I've shifted and I have a very different point of view on Aphrodite now. And I loved the fact that you went beyond sort of the mushy love and the sparkly colors, which are part of Aphrodite, but you really kind of focus in on the idea of friendship and compassion and empathy. And I think we could probably use a little more Aphrodite in our world today.
Well, thank you for that. That's definitely what I was going for. And I'm an Aphrodite. I actually think you're right. And this is actually, as you step back and you look at like a writer's, I think, lexicon of work, you find different like themes that kind of run through them. And this idea of compassion and empathy, one, I think is so important in the world we live in today. But it's also something that has kind of run through my work from the beginning. If you look at like, let's say the Crave series, right? My character's name is Grace. And that is because I really want to talk about what mercy is and what empathy is and what it is to be graceful in the face of both defeat and triumph, you know? And yeah, I just think that having learning, right? That yes, books and all of these other things obviously are very important. And I mean, I don't, and the Aphrodites are not unlearned by any means.
No, not at all.
And also, you have to temper wisdom with kindness and wisdom with empathy. And I think, if you want to live a really good life.
And I love the idea, sort of another thing that I think is so important to middle grade that comes through loud and clear in this book is the idea of figuring out who you are and being true to yourself, even if it's not who your family thinks you should be or who your friends think you should be, but finding that ground that's just yours and then allowing people in.
Oh my gosh, that's really lovely that you say that. I actually that is something that I truly believe. It's certainly something that I struggled with. I think in my early years, I was born to two older parents, and my mom is my mom was she died a few years ago.
I'm
My
sorry.
mom was very much, I think, an Athena, like all the way through. And I think that, I mean, I don't think I know. Like there were so many times in my life, she's like, I don't know where you came from, because I've been an Aphrodite since I was like, like that high. And she's like, and I think that struggle for me, right, with like, how do I be who I am while still making my mother proud of me or still like, all of that was a struggle that I really, really, I think spans a lot of my life. And I think that is a struggle that so many, I think it is definitely an adolescent thing in general. As you're changing, as you're growing up, you start to think, well, am I this way or am I that way? And what happens if, especially in middle school where I think I taught middle school a couple years in my, as I was going to graduate school and before I started teaching college. And I think it's so much this idea of like, wow, I want to be different, but I want to fit in. I want to be different in a way that makes me fit in. I don't want anybody to stare at me because, so much is going on, right?
Right.
In your body and your emotions and everything as you try to figure out this new world that is opening up before you. And yeah, I just think it's a really powerful, powerful theme in writing.
I agree. And you mentioned the Crave series, and my girls said to tell you they loved the books. They're now
Oh,
grown-up girls, but
I'm so
uh,
glad. Thank you so much.
and you've written for adults as well. So you've done a lot of writing on the upper end of the spectrum. This is your first middle grade book. How does creating that world differ from the way you've written in the past? And sort of what did you have to bring to this story that might be a little different than you had done before?
Well, I think that this is how I feel about having written YA as well. I feel like writing middle grade and writing YA is a major, I mean, it's a gift and it's a privilege, but it also is a really big responsibility, right? Because especially if it's a series like your daughters with the Crave series that they really loved and embraced, you know, you're helping be a guide into the world, you know? I'm not saying you have like that big of an influence by any means. I'm just saying, but they internalize things that you teach them, right? Or that come up in the books. And so I think that I always take that very seriously. I also love it because writing for middle grade, even more than writing for YA, is there are just so many firsts. And that is such an amazing place to live. Like the first time you go away from home, like for like longer than a night at a sleepover or something, right? The first time you really have to make friends on your own. The first time you have to do all of these things. It's super exciting and super scary. And it's just such an honor to be able to write about those things. But the reason I really wanted to write middle grade is I wanted to try, I think it was part for me to try to figure out what was going on. Because, like I said, I taught middle school before, I taught high school for a little bit, I taught college. And early on, I've raised 3 kids. Story time is the most favorite time of the year in kindergarten or of the day in kindergarten, right? Everybody wants to, even all the way up to second, third grade, everybody wants to hear the teacher read the book. Everybody, gathers around on the carpet or whatever it is. I loved it myself when I was a kid. But somewhere between there and when they hit like junior high or when they hit high school or college, I kept hearing over and over and over again from my students, I hate reading. Reading is boring. Reading is terrible. I'm really bad at it. I don't want to do this. Why do we have to read this book? And it broke my heart because something happens in there that does that for them. And as an educator, it destroys me. And I kind of wanted to say, well, like, let's go down and let's look at these books. And I know there are so many, and this is not a statement at all, obviously, against middle grade books because there are like so many brilliant ones. Oh my God, so many brilliant middle grade books. But somehow, like, we're not necessarily reaching as wide an audience as we could be reaching. And I was kind of like hoping, like, when I started working or writing for Simon and Schuster, we kind of talked about this, like, how do we get really exciting books, not just mine, obviously, but
Right.
really exciting books into the hands of kids so that they can understand how amazing reading is when it opens a whole new world to you, right?
And as an educator as well, you've kind of gotten me thinking because one of the things I've been saying recently is I think that the read aloud is one of the single most radical things we can do in a digital age. And we stop it way too early. Part of that getting kids excited about reading, getting them excited to enter the pages of a book is to build the stamina by doing the read aloud. And it shouldn't end in third grade. We should continue to be bringing out books like yours and reading a chapter every day, and you build that stamina that way, but also offering choice. Doing literature circles where kids can choose. You've got a group of 5 books.
The book that
Which one
interests
do
them,
you want to
right?
read? What interests you? You still are meeting your requirements. You're getting them to enter the world of fantasy, for example, but you're giving them ownership of the process. And I think that the more we've swung the pendulum towards following scripted curriculum, towards a very lockstep kind of way of teaching, we've forgotten that along with learning how to read, we need to want to read. And that piece can't be neglected.
I think that's a really powerful statement. And I think about my youngest son, actually my youngest 2 sons are dyslexic. And reading has been like a real struggle for them through most of their lives, which broke my heart in so many ways, right? My oldest is a voracious reader, cannot read enough or fast enough. and he'll read anything, if it's fiction, he'll read it. And it wasn't until my middle son really discovered graphic novels that he was like, and he's also my artist, but he was like, I get this, I can read in this format and I can understand. And it wasn't until, and we went through, gosh, everything imaginable with my youngest. And it was actually audiobooks that did it for him,
Mhm.
where he was like, oh, and it was not until he was like a sophomore in high school. I mean, I'm not talking, he discovered them early
Right.
because he just graduated from high school last year. But then he was really, and then like we can't keep him in audiobooks, and it's like money I so love to spend because I'm
Absolutely.
like, oh my gosh, he's finally reading all the things he couldn't before. But I think it's really interesting that you said that we stop it too early, because one of the things I did with my boys, and something that my mom did with me, is like I read to them until sixth, seventh, eighth grade.
Same.
Like, I mean, I think somewhere around eighth grade, they're like, get out of my room. And I'm like, that's fine. But like up until then, especially because my youngest two were so close in age, like, we would, like, crawl I would just crawl under their bed, because they shared a room. I'd crawl
Yeah.
under one of their beds, and I would just, like, read Percy Jackson or the, False Prince or Artemis Fowl, or, because we're
Yeah.
Percy Jackson. I remember the day we discovered Percy Jackson, my oldest son and I. It was like, actually, he knew it before I did. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the most amazing book ever. This voice just grabs you." And we did that all the way through 7th grade, and they liked it. They couldn't do it themselves, I think, at that age because of the dyslexia, but they really enjoyed doing it. And I think that there were times in books that I taught when I was teaching high school, where I'd read a chapter aloud to my students, and I always realized that those chapters, they were very often the most engaged in, you know? Because they'd read
Exactly.
along with me, but even in high school, like, they were like, "Oh, I understand this better."
You
But
were
also, yeah.
modeling.
Yeah, modeling. And then my youngest, I realized for the first time in any of my kids, he actually got a choice, like you were discussing in the books that he read. Like, basically, his teachers would be like, "Hey, these are 4 books. Pick the one that most appeals to you." And he picked some really interesting books that I didn't expect, but that he really loved, you know? I think it's phenomenal. Choice in reading is everything.
And I think, as you said, it's not just choice in the content, it's also choice in the format.
Mhm.
Because I also have a dyslexic niece. And as you were talking about your youngest, it was graphic format when she discovered that and the audiobooks. And those two things together have made a huge difference. And that's not going to be the case for every kid, but why
Mhm.
not offer the opportunity? It's still reading. How many grown-ups drive around all day listening to their audiobooks? That's
Right?
reading.
Absolutely. And the way that, he and I did it for like school books, not for other books. Most books he'll just like he's really into Warhammer, so he'll build models and he'll just listen that way. But like when we're doing a school book, like we'll have the print book, he'll have the print book, and then he'll also have the audiobook, and he'll do it together, right? Because I understand reading comprehension, all of that is, but that also helps him comprehend. And I just think
Absolutely.
we live in a time where there are so many great alternatives in how you can absorb a book that, yeah, I think you find the one that's best for you
I
and you just
agree.
run with it. I love that.
And I noticed in the aftermath that it ends neatly. The first book ends neatly. Like you could read it on its own and you would be satisfied with the ending. But you clearly left the door open for many more books because Ellie and Fifi have barely touched their tasks that they
Your
have to
labor?
achieve, their labors. You reference there are a whole lot of myths you want to unpack, and they're only first years, and they're what, 12,
Six
13?
Yeah, there's 6 years in the school, and the plan is the plan as of now is 6 books in the series. Although the 2nd book I'm writing right now, and it actually takes place the 2nd semester of their first year, and oh my gosh, I'm having so much fun. I'm having so much fun with it. I don't wanna say until we reveal the cover what the myth is that we're unpacking because it's really cool. But yeah, I absolutely plan to take them from 13 through 18. That is the plan, that my editor and I, have right now. So we get to watch them grow and get to watch them deal with more serious things because we've got like obviously a myth in each book, but there's a lot of other things that are going to be revealed in this book. And then there's like this overarching bad guy like situation that we're going to be dealing with a lot more starting in book 2.
Oh, interesting. Well, I can't wait. I definitely will want you to come back on to unpack that myth when you're
I
done.
would love that.
So, my last question for today, then, and it's the one I like to finish with everybody on, is what currently brings you hope?
Oh,
And it's a good Pandora question.
it is a good Pandora question. It's a great Pandora question. It's also a really interesting question because of the week that we have lived through right
Yes.
now, right? My kids bring me hope. I took being a boy mom incredibly seriously. I was a single mom for a lot of my life or a lot of their lives. And I have 3 boys, and I took it very, very seriously. And I think that they are these really kind, really gentle, really strong men, and I'm incredibly proud of them and the lives they're going to lead in the future. I think my children bring me hope a lot.
I love that. And as the mom of 2 amazing, compassionate, wonderful daughters, I thank you for raising those kinds of compassionate, wonderful sons.
Well, thank you very much. And I mean, I think the girls right now, like their generation of girls are just these incredible lights in the world and just such, going to be such amazing contributors to this world that we're living in. But yeah, I think that the children that we're raising, I think there's a lot to give us hope from them.
I agree. And I hope that we give them the space to be able to do that and to channel their inner Penelope and find their way in the world. Tracy Wolff, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I will drop a link to the Aftermyth in the show notes. And folks, seriously, go out, check it out, and let me know what you think about it. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
You've been listening to the Adventures in Learning podcast with your host, Dr. Diane. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, download, and let us know what you think, and please tell a friend. If you want the full show notes and the pictures, please go to drdianeadventures.com. We look forward to you joining us on our next adventure.